Arizona's Republican candidate for Secretary of State was also a 2020 election denier who has still not conceded. Joining us now is the Democrat who won that race, Secretary of State-elect Adrian Fontes. It's good to have you back on the show. Congratulations. What do you make of your challenger and Kari Lake not conceding?
Well, the voice that matters here is the voice of the people, the voice of the voters. And, concession is a genteel political art that is done well by Democrats and Republicans so that the peaceful transfer of power in our civilized government continues. Some people choose to participate in that practice. Some people don't, and that's up to them.
You know, Adrian, what's so fascinating is you look at Arizona, you look at most of the races that we all in the national media have been covering, the races Democrats won. And the national media focusing on races like yours because they were against election deniers, people who posed a direct threat to American democracy. But it's fascinating to look at some of the other races we don't talk about so much from Arizona. And it's where you had two people running and no election deniers. Well, shock of all shocks, Republicans did pretty damn well in those races in a year that Republicans were supposed to sweep. I mean, there's a clear message out of Arizona, isn't there?
Well, the message is really this, and I'm going to push back a little on the label election denier. We need to call them authoritarians because they don't believe in the democratic process. They don't believe in the will and the voice of the voters, the consent of the governed. This is an authoritarian movement that is soundly rejected by Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike, illustrated by the coalition of Republicans and independents that we built in my campaign. And so when you look at the people who really care about American democracy, who care about the function of our government and the regular, again, peaceful transfer of power, there's a lot more of us than there are of them. And we need to stop using kid gloves and worrying about their feelings. They're not just election deniers. They are authoritarians. There are still some of them around. We need to be very, very vigilant and continue to protect our democracy.
And Mr. Secretary-elect, congratulations, first of all, on your win. And you've never used the kid gloves during the campaign. You called Fincham, your opponent, a, quote, traitor clown. So you haven't had to worry about kid gloves with you. But there was, as Joe said, so much focus on Arizona and, frankly, national concern about what could have happened there in your race, in the governor's race, in the Senate race as well, and what the implications may have been for the vote in the future and for democracy in the country. So are you heartened by what you've seen, not just in your race or just even in your state, but across the country, where these people who said the 2020 election was rigged, for the most part, were run out?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, so many of us across the nation of whatever party have faith in the American public. We have faith in the American people and the American voters. That faith translated into votes. Those votes translated into victories for pro-democracy candidates across the United States of America. I'm joined by folks like Cisco Aguilar in Nevada, Jocelyn Benson in Michigan, and several other secretaries of state who fought back against these folks. Many thanks to the people who helped us get here. But the bottom line is the people have spoken. This authoritarian movement in the United States of America, it may be loud, it may be fun to cover for folks like you in the media, but it's dangerous, and we've got to continue to push back against it with vigor and with the strength of the American public.
Mr. Secretary Al Sharpton, let me join in congratulating you. But President Biden talked about this election, the midterm elections, was about democracy. And you've said this, the authoritarians against those that believe in democracy. And for the first time, a real focus nationally was on secretaries of state. You're on the front line. You had to take the attacks and the hits as some of your colleagues in other states that you named. How important is it now that the electorate understands that you can't just vote for the top of the ticket? Secretaries of state are important because that's where the sausage is made. And if we don't deal with the right secretaries of state, the top of the ticket won't get elected, or at least we won't elect one that will refuse to concede, as happened in your state. And we have authoritarians with loud noise really drowning out those that want democracy.
Well, Reverend, first, thank you. And second, I see this as an opportunity. I see this as a time and a place for Americans to renew their faith and to renew their intellectual curiosity into how government actually works. What roles are played by secretaries of state, by attorneys general, by a lot of these other races that don't get a lot of the coverage by national media. We have to become better citizens across the entire nation. And not that we have to agree on issues, but we've got to understand the structure. We have to understand the fundamental function of our government better. And I think this fight gives us an opportunity and a motivation to do that. And I hope folks are paying attention, because 2024 is just right around the corner, and we've still got a lot of battles to fight.
Yeah, Adrian, let me just assure you, you had brought up, asked if something was fun for those of us in the media. I can assure you that watching American democracy and the balance and fair and free elections and the balance and the rise of American fascism and one part of the Republican Party. Nothing fun about that for anybody here. I do want to pick up on, though, what you just said, because I was going to ask you this question, and you started moving in that direction, talking about the revival of intellectual curiosity. We're all frustrated. We all have friends that are election deniers who vote for authoritarians, as you've said, and Mika's seen me do it. I walk through the process, one conspiracy theory after another. I try to explain to people who have been dear friends my entire life why they have been lied to and misled. What I'm curious about is what can you do as Secretary of State? There's some people you'll never convince. But what about those who are the persuadables? What can you do as Secretary of State? What do you recommend other secretaries of state do to try to tamp down on this virus of misinformation?
Well, we're already doing it. I've already had several conversations with some of our reelected and incoming Republican members of the Arizona State Legislature. We've got to be bigger than the problem. We've got to be working together to help people understand that we are all in this together. You know, patriotism sometimes means you got to put your pride aside. You've got to put your partisanship aside and work together towards common ends. And the conversations that I've already had have basically looked at sort of this Eisenhower framework, if you will, of, look, if we work on the things that we have in common together, we're not going to have a heck of a lot of time to fight about things that we disagree on. That's the kind of example of leadership that folks like me have to set. We've got to reach out, and we've got to show the American public that this sort of constant pugilism against one another is bad. That cooperation will continue to open up more avenues for conversations, and that's how we as leaders can set the example of how civil society is supposed to work. Instead of worrying about fear and confrontation and that constant fight, nobody wants that. So that's really what I'd like to see more people do.
Yeah, I love that. Focus on the things that we agree on, get to work on that, because there are so many things that so many Americans agree on.
Yes, there are. Arizona's Democratic Secretary of State-elect, Adrian Fontes, thank you very much for being on this morning.